This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road, Jack, Finding the Zodiac. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. I'd like to start by welcoming Harriet Suchet to the show.
Good morning. Happy Valentine's.
Good morning. Happy Valentine's. I'm very excited for today's show. We've got a special guest that's going to be joining us here shortly. Somebody that Harriet has been working with for quite some time, right?
I know Lindsmac sometimes on Twitter, so I know the name.
Well, she works also with Megan Walsh of the John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, correct?
Yeah, and it's pretty bad what's happened with poor Megan. But anyways, hopefully we can get Megan on so she can tell her story.
Right. Well, I'm going to start first with some YouTube responses or shout outs, and one of them is from Tolga Kurt 1468, and he says, although I have researched the Zodiac Killer in great detail and depth, I can say that this man, Jack Terrence, is definitely the Zodiac Killer. Arthur Lee Allen cannot be the Zodiac Killer. I want to give him a high five. Not just because it promotes my thoughts and theories, but somebody else sees the truth, and I just find that absolutely amazing. And then that leads us to, and I had actually received these particular communications from Lindsmac several weeks ago. I've been chomping at the bit to get her on here, but we had been slowly moving through the presentation, and we are finally here today. And these shout outs that she had introduced me to herself by were there it is. Rupert Murdock owned those newspapers, and what she's referring to is the March 1981 forced busing letter that had the insert with all the newspapers, and I had read down the list of who these owners were, kind of not knowing. I did as much research to find out who owned them, but not necessarily about that individual person. So when I had reported who the owners were of these particular inserts that had received these communications, this is what her response was. So, which leads us to the fact that he also went further to own Fox News and Fox TV, in which employed none other than John Edward Walsh Jr., whom was the host of America's Most Wanted from 1987 to current. And that might have just answered one of my questions, but in which Harriet mentions often in her solves. Now, she also elaborated a little more and said also to mention this as well. You mentioned a lot of things happening in 1981, including the letters, like you mentioned. What else happened in 1981? Adam Walsh, at 6 years old, was kidnapped or abducted July 27th of 1981 in Hollywood, Florida. This was John Walsh's AMW on Fox, the one mentioned in many of Harriet's solves as well. His first son, in which he got the job with Rupert Murdock, who owned the newspaper you mentioned, as well as owning Fox due to Adam's death. I think we need to talk ASAP. We are getting so close to connecting things together with all of these communications, in which connects all of these so-called serial killers, as they call them. As we know, they are all a part of this satanic group ran by a higher power whom calls the shots, as Jack Terrence mentions in his letters, as he gets angry at these higher up people for jobs he's been given to do, such as these murders. Amazing work. We need to put our work together for a show ASAP. So here we are, and I would like to actively invite to the show Lindsay McBrayer.
Hey.
Good morning.
How are you guys?
Awesome. We did it. We're finally here all together. I'm so excited. All right. So how did you get involved with this mess?
I've watched America's Most Wanted literally my entire life. I was like one of those freaks people. Like I would watch them over and over because I would catch up and I'd see them all, and then I would just be like on the edge waiting for the next episode to come out or for the next season. And as many of us were, but even back in the day. And I just remember watching Unsolved Mysteries with my mom, and so I've always been obsessed with the crime, the crime junkie theme. So I was researching something else on online, and I came across Megan Walsh, and I came across her and Gino with Insights podcast, and started watching the first couple episodes. And then once I started watching, it's kind of the same thing with you. Once I started watching, I was like, oh my God, I know this and I know that and I know this and I know that, because I've researched, many cases. And so I contacted her and told her, the information that I had, and she was like, yes, we need you on the show. So then I went on her show with Gino and Insight on Rumble, and we've just been there ever since. And that was about almost 3 years ago now.
And what was the name of that podcast again?
It was Reexamined with Megan Walsh. And that was when they were going from the beginning of the case files, going through them. And then, of course, I had to get ahead of myself and started going through them, and was so into it that I wouldn't even sleep for days, because I was so, when you get into that hole, it's like you can't get out. I gotta know, I gotta find out, I have to find the answer. And so that's where I was, and that's where it took me. And it took me on this route of the Zodiac, and then putting things together, and just, getting in tons of rabbit holes, really. And but true rabbit holes that is insane information that I would find.
Now, so how did she end up with the case files?
So she actually started looking at her brother's case, I think probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and started asking her dad questions, and he kind of just was like, would give her, these short little answers, and that didn't make sense to her, just to kind of like those answers that just to get you to shut up. And
placating.
Yeah, and so she just kind of got curious, more curious about it, and started going through the case file. And that's when she started asking her dad more and more questions, and that's when he got, it seemed like he got more tense about things. And that's whenever her whole escapade started, with her, him messing around with her kids and making false allegations against her, and ultimately, one by one, got each of her children removed from her custody.
Wow. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But so these case files obviously were in her father's possession?
Yep. And they're online. Anyone can go and look at them. So. Is
it like the FOIA files from the FBI, the archives?
Yep.
Okay. So are they also heavily redacted?
The actual whole entire case file, that's kind of more so in order, is I could put it in the description when we get done, so everybody can go look at it and go and rummage through them. But there's thousands of pages. It's like one of those. Yeah, it's one of those cases where there's literally thousands. So I still haven't even been through all of them, because sometimes I miss things. I'll just skip around, and I find more things every time I go into them.
Yeah, there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of files.
Yeah,
but when
it's not
research
a one person thing, for sure.
No. And we all have our little niches, and we all have our particular interests in the things that we research and we want to look up. And this is why it's good that people reach out to us, or we reach out to others who are sharing in the same endeavor, especially when we find our paths crossing. I initially got involved with the Zodiac case just because of the Zodiac letters and communications that occurred in San Francisco, but subsequently stumbled onto all these other communications, including the ones to John Walsh, which are labeled as the Scorpion letters. Now, I believe that I saw some type of a letter where John Walsh indicated that these were not Zodiac letters. And I find that very, very hard to believe. Not only is the linguistics, the information that's being provided, the way that it is written, the coded ciphers that we see from the Zodiac case, all of these things share and bear these same similarities. So I've put up, and we're not really going going to discuss the letters quite yet because they don't come until 1991, but I wanted everybody to be able to take a look at the actual scorpion letter. Here we have to the side, and you can see that writing is just spot on with what we've been looking at throughout my entire presentation. And that made me wonder, why would the Zodiac be interested in writing John Walsh? Well, after I've done all of the research and found so many different high-profile individuals who have lost their children to unsolved murders, I saw this, and I know that they did solve this one, that they did, they believe, I'm sorry, no, they believe that Toole, right? Otis Toole, his name is ridiculous for me to say. They believe that he was the suspect, but I know that we've shown enough information that would support that he is not the suspect that they're looking for. I think we lost Lindsmac.
Oh, come on, come back, Linz.
Right, because I'm here to go over these major points, or these key points that I asked her to send me, so that we can kind of give everybody an idea of what it is that she's going to cover. And of course, she's providing real-time, articles and other such items that are cross-connecting John Walsh with some heavy hitters in the area of media and mob and cartels, high-end individuals, basically the elite, as I would call them. And I had often wondered myself, a loss of the child usually decimates a person's life, whether it causes a divorce and, just great depression. Most people don't really recover from having lost a child. And how did he become this top #1 spokesman for the FBI's most wanted? Always kind of boggled me. But now that she showed me this information, it's kind of a no-brainer to think that not only did he receive letters from the Zodiac Killer, he also lost his son. And to me, this appears as a control tactic by these individuals when they don't like what someone has done. And I've always said that the media can make you and break you. And we've seen who they've broken. And now we've seen somebody that they've made. I hope she's able to come back.
All I know is for watching the transformation of a guy named John Edward Walsh Jr. going from, and there's the information that you can find out there that he was like, well, I was into a little bit of cocaine and stuff like that, but he becomes remade for, like a Hollywood thing, and put him in front of TV and, be very convincing, pointing, you can make a difference. And, a lot of us fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
There she is.
I'm back.
I'm back.
Okay, there we go. Well, so I'm on my iPad, and it said it got too hot, and it just stopped. And I'm like, how's it too hot? It's not even hot here.
Did you have to put on the air conditioning?
Yes. So I just pulled it off and then just restarted it. So
the middle of winter, I bet you didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're in the South, so I mean, and you're pretty much, you might as well be South in California,
right?
Because it's always South there. It's South weather, but yeah, this morning it was like 40 something, and so right now it's only like 78.
Oh.
I don't even think it's 78 though.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
That's much warmer than I would have anticipated. Yeah. Okay, so I was just about to start with the 11 points, as I put it, that John Walsh Jr. is part of a group targeted or affected by the Zodiac Killer. Number one, you had indicated that the first mob boss of John Walsh is John Monahan, correct?
Yep.
And how was he his boss?
So he was his boss at the Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood, Florida, which was a hotel that was highly fonded of as far as celebrities at the time. Frank Sinatra is one big one. And many politicians. Jimmy Carter is actually another one. And I have photos of him with one of the executives at the Diplomat. And I actually have a whole presentation about the Diplomat and what all went on there during that time, which was many different events that they would have for politicians, conferences, like all these different things that we see now that they have. they would have at the Diplomat Hotel, and concerts and all that, as far as the Hollywood stars go. So John Monahan was in with the big guys, which was a big thing. And so, and then John Walsh was his executive manager.
So he was never no small town guy in any of our eyes. I mean, if you're running a major hotel for a mafia boss, and rubbing shoulders with politicians and mob and celebrities and all of these elite, I would never consider that a small town person. So no. I think that he tries to portray that he's small town. And that's what I had always wondered, because when I was made aware of the loss of his child, I thought he was basically nobody, he was just some person who lost their child and then just rose to fame. So you've kind of put some pieces together for me here that makes this make a little more sense also as to why the Zodiac would have written him. Now, so John Monahan has been linked to whom as far as the mob is concerned? Because you labeled him a mob boss.
Well, Meyer Lansky is one. He was in dealings with the FBI and with the CIA, and in all different areas of the United States as well. And the most prominent ones was New York and Florida and California.
And I think your earlier solves, Harriet, mentioned Meyer Lansky, correct?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Oh, yeah, they did. I forgot.
And the same places, California. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're seeing some things tying together.
Yeah, we're seeing things. We're crossing over each other. Yep.
Right. So number 2, you said John Monahan linked to Meyer Lansky and Alan Rivenbark, mafia and cartel bosses. Who is Alan Rivenbark?
So he was another one of the cartel bosses at the time that they were in cahoots with. And I think you have an article on him.
Yes, you did send me an article, and we are going to be bringing all of those articles up in a future podcast for people to absolutely. I want to cover those because I did see some interesting reading in there that leads us back to all this nonsense and illegal business that we see going on throughout these cases.
Well, as you know, you have all your different mob bosses, and you have all of your different mafia bosses, and then you have all your cartel bosses, and so they're all in cahoots with each other because they have to keep all of their systems running. In order to keep all of their systems running properly, they have to communicate with each other, and so that's where he comes in too.
And that's what I've been trying to explain to some of my Democratic friends who are enraged over Trump being president again and that the world's going to end, is that these people don't do anything that they don't get approval for. And they're all working together, and they all rub elbows together. I mean, just like attorneys hang out with attorneys and doctors hang out with doctors, politicians are going to hang out with politicians, and presidents are going to hang out with presidents. And to think by any means that they absolutely hate Trump is just asinine. I mean, they make a good media mess of it to confuse everybody and to bash him when it's going on. But the realism is that he's not going to get away with doing anything that the powers don't want to have happen. So everybody slow the roll.
Like in his case they all know each other, but they all also know the things that he knows. So right,
100%. They work together on this.
Now. That's why they're mad at him, because he knows all of their baggage.
Right. And they know all of his, and they, weaponize the media against him on purpose to kind of create all of this hubbub and chaos so that people overlook what's really going on. And I ultimately believe that Trump was placed back into office so he can pardon himself for the very acts they accused and got him convicted of, so that he can clear his list just like Biden cleared his son's list. All very interesting information.
Well, when you get to one other person, that's where Trump kind of comes back up again, and it's some more things about what we're talking about that he knows a lot about.
The big hubbub on Facebook right now that I saw some of my friends posting about or being upset about is the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. They want to rename it the Gulf of America. And I giggled that people are really upset about this. When we have people starving and homeless and you're upset about the rename, for God's sakes, they went across the United States and renamed literally almost every single what they call politically incorrect name of a town, of a statue, I mean, we used to have Negro Bar. Now it's called Black Miners Bar. How is that any more politically correct? You're still saying the same thing. You've just changed the words.
Well, what made me mad is one of my favorite country artists was the Dixie Chicks, and they took Dixie out, and I didn't even know until one day I was trying to find a song of theirs, and I kept searching Dixie Chicks, and I couldn't find it, and then it popped up the Chicks, and I'm like, and so my husband was like, "Oh yeah, they changed their name to the Chicks. It's no longer the Dixie Chicks," and I'm like, "What?
Why? Was there a particular reason for?"
I guess the Dixie word was too Southern for them. I don't know.
All right. Well, that brings us to point number 3, which is Jeff O'Regan. He has been known to be involved with being a drug smuggler, and he's a friend of John Walsh's and John Monahan, correct?
Yep. He was actually one of the ones who got him down to Florida, and that's one of the ways he got to Florida in general, and because he's actually from New York as well, just as John Walsh is.
So how long after he went to Florida did this happen to his son? Do you know?
So he got, I think it was early 70s.
That he went?
Yep.
Okay.
72,
so
I think. And I think he got married to Reve in 74.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So on item number 4, John Monahan is the person you stated that identified Adam's head, not his own parents, correct?
Yep.
So that's got to be a very personal connection to allow your mob boss to be the person to go identify your son's head. I just find that extremely strange, as I think most would. I know that it could be detrimental. That's an image you probably don't want stuck in your head. So I can kind of see why a parent would not want to have to make that identification, because the last thought or, memory of your child will be that in your head forever. So I do kind of understand it, but just a strange person to do that. Not another family member, not some, very, very strange.
Yeah,
but
we see other
obviously
family members doing it all the time, but not your boss.
Right. So that indicates a very, very close relationship. And then number 5 is Harold Hank Bloom, which, do you know who Harold Bloom is, Harriet?
The name Bloom sounds really familiar. But not offhand right now.
Well, maybe this will jog your memory. So she sent me an article that indicated that there is a Watergate and a CIA connection to the murders of Adam, of Bob Crane, and Gig Young, and that Davis was stealing children for others to adopt. Now, who is Davis again, Lindsay?
Harold Davis, I think it is. Who was another another informant gave a tip on him that he had information.
Gotcha. So you sent me an article, and this was basically some of the theories that were being listed in the newspaper at the time, and we'll go into the full article at a later date. But it says in 1981, Hank Bloom of Vero Beach says he knew things about Watergate, and that John Davis of Fort Pierce was being paid by the CIA to keep Bloom quiet by murdering Walsh, actor Gig Young and his wife, actor Bob Crane, and others. Davis says he didn't know Bloom. Bloom later can't explain why the CIA didn't just kill him, the police said. Well, maybe that would have caused too much commotion. This is what I've been saying this entire time. They learned after assassinating JFK that they can't go around assassinating people that are prominent and that will cause people to come looking for those answers and ultimately find them. So to kill other people around you, like your children or otherwise, is a great way to control you and what you say. So Harriet, did you have any information on Hank Bloom speaking to Bob Crane and Gig Young in regards to Watergate?
No, but it's a very interesting cross connection.
And then I think Bob Crane has been.
It cost him his life what he did with the At Kid.
So that's where you brought Bob Crane in, because you believed he was speaking with Wayne Williams, right?
Yeah, he he got a little. I think he got a little ahead of himself by, going to get something that Jimmy Carter had that particular stamp, and they're going after the Nazis, and Wayne Williams wanted to be a star like Bob Crane became, and it cost Bob Crane his life.
And then you see that Jimmy Carter is one of the prominent politicians who loves the Diplomat Hotel, and he visits often.
So it's all kind of making its nice little web there. But interesting that it brought up the death. And of course, Gig Young was purportedly had shot his wife, I believe, and then turned the gun on himself. And they had stated that they believed it was a self-murder.
That's what they love doing that. They love doing that.
Self-homicided. I think that's what we self-homicided. So basically, this could still wrap up around this. I mean, if Davis is purportedly out there searching for nabbing children to sell to other people, which I think is the claim that Hank Bloom made, that this is what this individual was doing. And I did see articles in regards to that. Again, we'll get back to those articles. But that kind of ties into play with some of the theories that Harriet has come up with, which is that John Walsh was stolen. Adam Walsh was stolen to provide somebody else with a child, right, Harriet?
I'm seeing that through the Star Sentinel, the thing that Megan had sent me, that he did live on, and he became Lily Brandt, and also was sold into the Finder's Cult. I mean, very detailed, amazing details. So you have that going on too. You have very talented kids. So they're trying to do something. It's really bizarre, but it becomes very convoluted.
Well, to say the least, yes. So that's now I can see why they're reporting theories in regards to people looking for children, people stealing children for children. And we know that this occurs. I mean, come on, America, we do have to wake up and understand that human trafficking is definitely something that is going on out there. What else did I see in there? Said he didn't know Bloom, later can explain why the CIA didn't. Again. So I think that number 6 is John Walsh's polygraph results. I thought that was very interesting. So another connection there was one of the statements that was made in regards to his polygraph was that he became part of the anti-Vietnam movement and felt very rebellious against the President Nixon. So we know that Nixon's very much part of this group. He said that he let his hair grow and experimented with an assortment of illegal drugs and narcotics. On 3 occasions, he tried LSD, smoked marijuana, and experimented with cocaine and mescaline. Now, I found this interesting because that's 4 drugs that he claims he only experimented with 3 times. Was that each drug 3 times? Was that one drug one time, another drug another time? Like
very short, very short and to the point, and that's it.
I feel like Clinton all over again, that I took a puff, but I didn't inhale.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if anyone knows, because one of those
saying I didn't inhale.
One of those drugs that was mentioned, I actually wasn't familiar with. So when I came across that article, I was like, what drug is this? Mescaline. And I had to look it up, and it's actually very similar to LSD.
Right. And mescaline comes up in the Zodiac realm. It was definitely an era. What was that? Early 70s, late 60s, Harriet?
Yeah.
We had the mescaline murders, which they I want to say Graysmith.
Up in the Napa, I know that the Napa County areas, definitely.
Right. So we know mescaline was a heavy part of what some of the murders that were attributed by Graysmith to the Zodiac were mescaline murders. Eva Blau, Marie Anstey, is that correct?
Yep, Anstey. Yep.
So yeah, we've heard that word before. Interestingly enough, also, and I've never heard of mescaline. I've never heard of anybody talk about mescaline.
Yeah.
Clearly, it was either just outside of the grasp and reach of average society, which would indicate that you were either involved with people from this realm or the elite, or you had enough money to be able to afford something like this. It didn't seem to me like it had taken over America like cocaine had. Like everybody can get their hands on cocaine and everybody knows about cocaine, but mescaline was not something that I ever learned about until I got into these cases.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting connection. Also, a friend, James Campbell, who happened to stay, I believe, with John Walsh at one point in time, had an affair with Rivet and reported their drug use in a deposition or a transcript in one of the legal cases that John Walsh was caught up with with Sears. Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yep.
So there's another connection, and still currently using them at the time that he has children, which is mind-boggling, because I feel like that's very hypocritical to remove Megan's children simply because she's using marijuana when you, in fact, were using and doing drugs throughout your children's life as well.
Yep.
Yeah. The pot calling the kettle black, right?
She's using the marijuana for
her
treatment.
cancer.
It's not to get high. It's not that kind. But
Right. So she's
explain that to them. But anyways, yeah.
No, and we know the great medical effects that marijuana has for people who suffer from brain issues, from cancer, the ability to eat, the ability to sleep, or all the things that the body needs in order to heal from things like this. And it's almost a disgusting sideshow that they've turned it into some type of illegal activity, or they know it heals, but that takes away from them making money in the medical society.
100%. Yep.
Chemical drugs that only detriment our bodies even more so. So
yeah, I mean, it's literally grows in the ground, like God put it here for a reason. So
for a reason, just like onion and garlic and mushrooms and all of the things that have their remedial basis. Cranberries, I mean, gets rid of a urinary tract infection. I'm trying to put the things together that work, but yes, plants all have a purpose.
Yep.
So number 8 was the Bahamas Mafia cocaine connection with the Paradise Hotel. What was that about?
So that was one place in the Bahamas was where they were doing a lot of the cocaine smuggling. And that's how, and they would go through the Bahamas, and then it would, you have the triangle, as we know, and it would go from the Bahamas to Florida, and then it would go up like literally a triangle. And that's where, and that was really heavily, there was so many murders and so many crimes in that general time in the early 80s in the Bahamas, as they're building a hotel. And, if you can go online now and just look up Paradise Island and see how ginormous it is now. And it was just in the beginning stages then. And so that's whenever John Monahan was transferring John Walsh to be the executive director of that during that time.
And does anybody find a coincidence with Paradise and the Zodiac?
Yep. He mentions that a lot.
Yep.
So when was this hotel, when did this hotel begin to be built?
76, I think.
Okay, so Zodiac has already mentioned and brought up Paradise, but we had attributed it to the Paradise Hotel, a motel, should I say, in Lake Tahoe. I also tracked that back to owners of another Paradise Hotel, which I want to say was like back east somewhere. We talked about that some time ago. One of the theories were that he wouldn't courier the drugs for the Bahama Mafia, and that was one of the reasons why his son was killed, correct?
Mm-hmm. But
and I think
that's in the case files as well, but we checked everything's good, nothing there.
One of the most interesting articles that you sent me was one where the police are giving all these different theories, including this one of he wouldn't courier drugs. And at the end of the statement, they say they thoroughly checked all these different things out and that the Walshes absolutely have no skeletons in their closet.
Yep.
What?
We definitely do.
I
Boy,
just
do
got
they.
chills again. It just never fails.
I'm sorry, but I have skeletons in my closet and I'm low level. I've never been involved with any of these people. To say that they have no skeletons in their closet is just absolutely asinine. We just read off a list of 8 different, skeletons that, quite frankly, you might want to call it a business relationship, but these people aren't identifying your son's beheaded head, because you just work with them. I mean, there's got to be so much more going on here than we actively realize. Now,
Well,
number
and not
9.
only that, they found the head while he was in New York, going on the Today Show, the Good Morning Today Show.
Really?
Yep.
And where did they?
He didn't even tell Reve until later that day, but because he had already got a call before the show even went on about the head being found, and just didn't tell her at the time, and then just let the show go on because they didn't want to. I guess he didn't want to interrupt their show.
Well, what the heck? You would stop everything. The head's found. Well, there's no reason for me to even go on Good Morning America. I now need to be addressing the fact that they found my son's head. Yep. What a media hog. Like, I can't even comprehend. Had somebody given me that phone call, am I going to proceed with going on air? You guys, I literally woke up this morning to this cute little heart-shaped note that was tucked into my coffee cup from my mom. And I read the outside of it and I almost choked up and started crying and I didn't even open it to read the rest of it because I know I would have been a sobbing baby because she's so darn sweet. So I can't imagine getting a phone call that my child's head's been found and I'm going to go straight faced onto Good Morning America pleading for more information about where my child is and please bring him home. I would love to know what that Good Morning America episode was about.
I've searched for that episode, and I can I have clippings of it, but I can't find the whole entire segment.
So was he there basically pleading for Adam to come home? Do you know?
Yep.
Oh,
It's the one where they're in the coats. They're in those long trench coats. I don't know if you've seen pictures. Maybe Harriet has. If you see those old photos from back then where they're wearing the trench coats, I guess it was cold. And they're hugging and they're like, whatever. That's the one. That's the day. That was the day in those pictures.
Go ahead, Harriet.
I just wanted to say that Megan Walsh had pointed out something. She says, my God, okay, my father, my mother lost my brother, but he's standing on top of cars and he's joyous and he's, something's wrong. And there's pictures of a very joyous John Walsh. We're going to find Adam. And she said, this is just not right.
Yeah.
So So I just wanted to point that out. So there's supposed to be pictures, and it just doesn't look right.
No, it doesn't. And it's almost like he's faking the achiness in his voice, and there's never any tears ever.
I think that I've even seen John Ramsey break down and cry over John Bonet. Yeah. So I would anticipate that even the strongest man would cry over the loss of a son. Sons are pretty important to their fathers,
Yep.
But again, we spoke last night, Lindsay, and we can never predict how a person is going to react under grief or trauma. So I'm not going to judge him for the way he acts. But if it's odd and he's, not known to be a crier, maybe he wouldn't be. But this whole let me go on a rampage of, media episodes and requests after knowing that the head had been found, that to me doesn't sit well. That makes absolutely no sense to me. He also declared,
did you even get the gig? Like how does a random small town little guy who their child is missing, how do you get a gig on Good Morning America like that within a week?
That was how soon after?
Yeah, it was August 11th, and he went missing on July 27th. So, however, it's about.
And how long after did they find the head?
So they found the head on August 11th. They were on the
Oh,
show August 11th, that morning.
okay.
So I think they found it. The fishermen's found it like around maybe early in the morning because they were fishing in that area.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that takes us to number 9, where it was well known that John Walsh didn't believe that he needed the FBI's help. Just Good Morning America. That's another thing that you had presented to me.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that for us.
Well, it says, and there's many different articles too about how no need for the FBI, and he was always against the FBI, and police were handling it in Hollywood, and we didn't need their help. But then when he goes on America's Most Wanted, maybe I could put this clip. Well, actually, the clip is on my TikTok, but there's a clip of one of his in the beginning of his show series or episodes where he is just strictly saying, "We are the only television show endorsed by the FBI on Fox."
That's Walsh talking about America's Most Wanted?
Uh-huh.
Gotcha. So he doesn't, and who says we don't?
It's endorsed by the FBI, but you don't want the FBI to be involved in your son's kidnapping. And we all know why, we all know, the FBI, who was in charge of the FBI back then, and they were in cahoots with all these mafia and cartel people and bosses. So it just makes sense. Like, oh, no wonder you didn't want them in your stuff back then, but now you're buddies with them, so of course you're gonna promote them.
And Murdock, you said, was also in with the FBI as well, correct?
Yep.
So I find that as another oddity, because I would want everybody's help. I would want everybody on earth to stop doing what they're doing and find my child. And I don't care who you are and what you have going on.
Yeah.
I can't see if unless they were afraid that the investigation was going to lead the FBI to something that he didn't want them to know about him and the abduction of his son. Why would you not want the FBI to be involved? That makes no sense. Number 10 is Hank Asher, which is Walsh's buddy. Was he also a drug runner or drug trafficker?
Yep. And the media tried to dismiss that when that information came out back then. And even Walsh tried to cover it up as well with some statements back then. He's not in with that and blah blah blah, and he's a supporter of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He donates such and such amount, and he's created the VICAP system where you can it started with the law enforcement officials where they could track individuals that had committed crime. And then it went on from there to get even bigger and bigger. And then they also used that same system for rigging elections as well.
Nice. Well, and that's what I had on here: computer programming, spy ops for the police, CIA, and election hacking dealings with the VICAP. So VICAP is the system in which they employed to do these things, correct?
Yep.
Learning something new every day.
That brings along all the other systems that they have now, even after Hank Asher. And but he was the start of it. And they make it out to be like all these systems are such great tools, but yeah, they're a great tool for them because they can just choose anybody in their little system who they want to target or who they want to be their little patsy anytime they need them.
And what type of election hacking dealings was it involved with?
I have a chart that actually I could send to you. Well, I think I have sent it. It actually shows exactly all the connections and how it was used.
So that's not the one that you showed me in regards to the pedophilia ring, right?
No.
Okay, so we'll get to that. We'll be showing everybody that here in the future.
Like I said, it's a lot of information to take in, and it really does have to be shown piece by piece in order to understand how they all connect, because it is a lot, to take in.
Correct. And that's why we're starting with something minimal at this point, just throwing out these teasers, because we're going to climb into all this collected articles and information that Lindsay has. Number 11 is Roy Cohn. Mob attorney. He represents Murdock. He covers money laundering for the cartel and Bush under Reagan and former FBI executive leader dealings. So we all understand mob attorney because that's Melvin Belli, and he's wrapped up in the Zodiac case. He's received letters. F. Lee Bailey. We do know that some of those out there that will protect the most wretched, evil people, and usually it's high-end celebrities, the elite, basically attempting to get them out of things like RICO, statutes and things of that nature, basically protecting the people who are making illegal money. And then he's actually the attorney for Murdock.
He's many people's attorneys. He's Murdock's attorney. He was Meyer Lansky's attorney. He was many different mob bosses' attorneys back then. He was like that big attorney that, like the one that did the O.J. Simpson case, like one of those that everybody used because they know that they could get him off. So he was like that guy. He was like that guy back then.
Was that Shapiro, Harriet?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
they all run in the same tax.
Yep.
Right. 100%. And then covers money laundering for the cartel and Bush under Reagan. Is that like the CIA, Iran Contra affair kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's been many meetings with Bush and Reagan and Roy Cohn and Murdock all in the same room.
Wow.
So this is by the 80s, because the stuff that I got that Jack is saying, he does not like Ronnie Reagan. It's just amazing. So we'll cover that later. But yeah, he really has a problem with him.
Well, and I find that Reagan ultimately was kind of like Biden, right? He was losing his gourd well into his presidency, and somebody else was running the show.
Show for him. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it says former FBI executive leader dealings. What does that entail?
I don't know.
Was Roy Cohn the former FBI executive leader, or is that
he was also the attorney for the head of the FBI, and I cannot remember his name. I wish I had my notebook. But I just made a chart not too long ago of
who was head of the FBI in the 70s, Harriet? Do you know?
It was
we had G. Gordon Liddy. We had a whole bunch of people that
I can picture his face in my head.
Involved with.
I can picture his face in my head, and as we know, the FBI is strictly United States, and CIA is supposed to be strictly outside the United States, correct? So they're not even supposed to be connected at all, and so the way that they did it, they had to go into these other businesses and through these other people in order to connect with each other and to communicate with each other without anyone knowing. And so Roy Cohn was in the inner midst of all that, making these dealings with these different people, so that way they won't talk about this, they won't talk about this, so and so won't talk about this. I got you covered. I got you covered. I got you covered. So everything's good.
Right. The CYA, I think, as you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am not sure that I want to hop on to the next slide at this point. I'm going to share with everybody next week the happenings of Murdock and his rise to fame and his syndicate success. And I basically had plotted down a bunch of information for us to go over to see where he comes from, where he ends up. I did find another connection between Murdock and the Star, because the Star and the Sun are legitimately entities that received communications from the Zodiac, including a fake anthrax letter in 2001 after the initial mailings to the senators and the Congress people and the five letters that had gone out to different locations. But then we saw a follow-up, and that had gone, I believe, either to this, I think it was to the Star. But I'm going to err on the side of caution because I'm not really caught back up with that stuff again. It's been a long time since I've looked at that information, but it was either the Sun or the Star, which is also owned by Murdock as well. So is this all a ploy? Is all of this And a lot of times I've contemplated this group creating a crisis where the newspaper and the media can make tons and tons of money reporting on these things. And that's why we're seeing these communications from these killers being mailed directly to these entities. I mean, these aren't just nobodies. It feels like it's all very comfortable for these people.
Well, yeah, and I think that, like, you know, they didn't have social media then, so they couldn't just post it online or post it, you know, somewhere online for people to share to find out. So he had to write them.
Well, the end result is Murdock actually runs actual internet servers. So he is so out there that if we think we're being suppressed and controlled, no wonder we're seeing that on things like Facebook and on Twitter, and the censorship and the truth not being told and everybody being shot down and TikTok being tried to be pulled away. I'm ranting now, but we've got about 5 seconds left. You guys, I want to thank both of you, Harriet and Lindsay, for being here. I look forward to next week and what we have to offer everybody in regards to these ties. Everybody have a wonderful Valentine's Day and a great weekend.
Yep. And I do want to add...